I hope you can hear me well enough. This is a great place to do videos, but the traffic makes it rather difficult to hear. I'm going to talk to you all this morning real quick, hopefully less than 5 minutes, about proper pruning cuts, a little bit about thinning, a little bit about reductions, especially on trees that have already been pruned, which is something we deal with a lot. So I showed up on a job site Monday or Tuesday. Doesn't matter whose it was, doesn't matter which office. They had shaped a Norway maple in the front lawn, and it had been shaped before. Tree was probably 25 to 30 feet tall, about that wide, your atypical front yard shade tree. And I showed up in a support role. I was just helping a crew leader out to finish this job because the crew that was there had to leave for an emergency. So, side note, doesn't matter. But what was left on that work order was the tree in the front yard needed thinned. And I kind of looked oddly at the tree and I thought, well, it's already been shaped or reduced. Why in the world are we now thinning it? So that's going to be my first topic of discussion. If your work order or if the prescription by the salesman says to thin, clean, raise, shape, if you're giving it the all around, we're going to do as much as we can to this tree to thin it out, tuck it in. Number one is you're going to be doing the interior work, you're thinning and cleaning. And then you come outside and make your reduction or shaping cuts. Because if you start outside, you're going to be pruning limbs that you would have otherwise removed. I don't really fault the crew leader at all. Maybe he was just never taught this. How he explained it to me made perfect sense. So for everybody who's maybe never been told that, if you have to thin and shape the same tree, always start by thinning. You're going to be making less cuts on the exterior, and in my opinion, the harder place to make cuts. So let's talk a little bit about doing shapings or reductions, especially with deciduous trees. Tools you're going to need. Depending on the size of the cut you're making, you're probably going to need a pruning saw, chainsaw. Make sure take a handsaw with you. That is a requirement now to have in the bucket. So hopefully everybody has a handsaw in your bucket truck. If you don't, just grab the one off your saddle. A pair of snips are great for in your back pocket. Pruner pole should be good and sharp, cleaned off. Use some WD-40 to get that thing lubed up so you're not wasting time. Loppers are also a great tool to have. Everybody should have a good set of loppers on their truck. Use the right pruning tool for the right size cut. And then as I went through the tree and as I thinned this tree, of course I was making cuts that had reduction cuts on the end of them. And I started to see a few things I didn't like. And you know what? I've made these same mistakes. We've all probably done this at one point in our career. And it typically happens with younger crew leaders. And most of the time a young crew leader is a little bit hesitant to make bigger cuts on a tree that they're shaping. You're fearing that you might poke too big a hole in it, or you're going to take too much off and then you have to reshape that area. So that's an experience thing, knowing how and when, in which situations that you can get a little bit more aggressive. And if the work order says we're removing 4 to 6 feet of growth, you can really go into that 6 or maybe even a little bit beyond that to achieve your goal. So things to note about the tree I was in and the limbs I pulled out of there. So this was one of my thinning cuts, and as you can see, this tree was pruned years ago, maybe 3 to 5 years ago, and this was the first initial reduction cut. And then we have new growth, and then maybe 2 to 3 years ago we have some more cuts out here where it was previously shaped. I don't know if it was by us or another company. I don't know the client's history. And then out here we had the cuts that were made that day. And if we count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 cuts were made to reduce this one limb. Before I move on, I do want to add that the tree looked awesome, very symmetrical, perfectly shaped. It looked great. That's a good thing. The other side of that is that the crew leader probably spent more time than he needed to achieve that because he was making way too many cuts. When we do reduction cuts or shaping cuts, especially on a deciduous tree, you want to be bringing your cuts from where you want your like the line you're envisioning. You know, you want 4 to 6 feet of growth off. Okay, I want the tree to be right down in there. You want your cuts to be beyond that, and then let your lateral growth create your new outer edge of the canopy, if you will. So instead of making 9 cuts out here, what maybe could have been done, well, what should have been done was to be reaching in, or you could have even been as aggressive as making a cut down here near where the old cut was, completely getting rid of this. But what this does, so it allows your lateral growth to fill in the hole you created. It also gives you your thinning, your outer thinning. So if you were to reach in every now and then, maybe every second or third cut, and make a bigger cut, bigger reduction cut, you're gonna also be thinning the tree as you go. And like I explained to the crew leader, if this is the pattern you create, where every 2 years, you know, this client says, hey, my tree looks awesome, it needs trimmed again, can you do it? And you're going back and you're making 1,000 pruner cuts, you're just thickening that outer edge of the canopy. So you're creating a tree that's going to be naturally lines-tailed. It's going to be super thick on the outer edge, and it's going to be really difficult to do anything else with that tree as far as reduction pruning or shaping in the future. So although it looks great, you're creating more work for you in the future. It's, if you think about an old yew bush that has been sheared for 20 years, 30 years, yews get really old. You know, you reach in past about 6 inches and there's no green growth at all because you're just continually buzzing that outer 3 inches of growth off. Same thing happens with deciduous trees when we shape them year after year after year after year. You've got to reach in, make some thinning cuts, and make some drop crotch reduction cuts to allow some light to get in, some interior growth, and it improves the tree's health, and it saves you work down the road. So the other thing that I mentioned, maybe I didn't mention, to the crew leader was that although the tree, because it had leaves on at the time, these were in the back of my truck for 2 days so they dried out, although it looked really good with the leaves on, this is not how we want to be leaving the end of a limb. Some of these are cut at a nodule, but you know, if you're thinking about making 6 cuts or 5 cuts like that, your cut really should be back here. And then preserve one good lateral and, you know, make your reduction or your shaping cut on the end of that. So that's going to achieve your thinning, and it's going to lessen the amount of bad cuts or heading cuts you leave on the end of the tree. And as far as the philosophy of, you know, you can't see it from my house, we're 60 feet in the air, you know, you can't see this cut. Real quick on professionalism and why people hire us. Most of us, or a lot of our crew leaders, are certified arborists. We're paid well. We charge a premium for our service. We need to be held to a higher standard as far as pruning, no matter if it's on a small plant right next to the front door, or if we're shaping a tree and the client will never see the cuts. And I have a quick story. I know I'm way over my 5-minute limit. I'm almost to 10 now. But my wife's uncle still is, stonemason for a long, long time. And I remember him telling me that he went to a chapel somewhere down near the city. It was an old stone building, and he went just for the sole purpose of going and looking at this building and the pristine stonework and chiseling and handwork that was involved in making this building. And he mentioned that at the top of this building there were these birds, chiseled birds, these stone birds that were hand carved. And he said even though those things were, whatever, 100 stories high or 300 feet in the air, however high that is, that the amount of detail on those birds was right down to the talons or the claw marks. It was almost fingernails on these birds. Something that the sculptor would have to know that nobody is ever going to see unless they went up there and looked directly at these things. And I thought, that's a good correlation to how we should be pruning trees. Treating every cut, every tree like the client is going to see it. Treat it like the leaves are already off the tree, that you can see right through it and see all the work you've done. And we're not trying to prove ourselves to the clients. They already have made it known that we're worthy of them because they've hired us. We're trying to prove ourselves to our own standards of professionalism, our own pruning standards, and we're trying to look good, do the best for the best advocate for the tree, and also to other professionals, because anybody with a bucket truck and a chainsaw or even a set of shears can go up and shape a tree. That's not the hard part. It's shaping a tree and using the proper cuts, proper tools, and making that job as easy on the tree and easy on you in the future is what is going to separate us and your work from the next guy. So that's all I have. I'm done talking. I'm almost at 12 minutes. I appreciate your time. Hope you learned something, and I will see you later.